Hi class, this is Mr. Roberts, and this is probably a little overdue, but because of a few conversations I've had with students and a couple conversations with different parents, I thought it would be appropriate to post kind of a tour of our um, electronic book, our ebook. So, first of all, if you don't have a username and password and aren't able to log into the textbook, please see me in class. They've greatly simplified the method of establishing and using accounts. It's a lot easier than it has been. But once you're able to log in and look at a book, there's a couple resources that are in the ebook that I think it's really important that I point out. So, obviously, all of our chapters are here and our sections, but the problem is that you know it's difficult to navigate from section to section, especially if you're looking for particular help or information. So one of the things that they did is they created a great section called reference. And I want to show you some of the things that are located in reference. So I'm going to start right here with student support. And in the student support, they've organized this with first of all, they've placed a tab for all of the e-tools that you see scattered throughout the book. So in chapter 8, 7 especially, there's a lot of e-tools that help us think about similarity and congruence for triangles. And you can click at those and view them here. But also when you're in the chapter itself, those are always hyperlinks that are within the section, and you can view those. I think one of the things that's probably an overused item that almost all students know about is the homework help. Um, I say that it's overused because I think a lot of students get to a point where they just are just looking through that and getting down answers, and occasionally there's some steps there, but I'm not saying don't use the homework help, but I'm just cautioning you don't overuse it. It's there, but it's limited in what it can help you do. Probably a better thing to be aware about, especially for parents wishing to help, or if you have a paid tutor or someone that's coming in and helping you figure out things, is to be aware of the Math Notes tab. This is organized according to all of the different chapters, and in each chapter, anytime one of the sections pops up with something that says Math Notes, they're listed here. So, for example, if I look at finding the midpoint of a line, this was a math note in chapter 7. When I click that and I take a look at it, um, I can immediately see, this is in just one of the lessons, right? And it says finding a midpoint. A midpoint is the point that divides a line segment into two equal parts. For example, M is the midpoint of this line segment AB. There are several ways to find out the midpoint of a line segment if the coordinates of the endpoint are known. One way is to add half of the change in x and half of the change add add change in x to 1/2 of delta x and add half of change in y into 1/2 delta y to the x coordinates of the leftmost point. So if I'm figuring this out, I can say, look, in order to go from A to B, I see that I'm increasing by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's saying, look, if I just add half of that, which is 2.5, 1, 2 and a half, I now have the y value of my midpoint. Similarly, if I go this way, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, that's just 4. Half of that 4 is 2. So if I'm starting at this point and I add 1, 2, here I'm at the midpoint. Um, so that's one way. I probably I look at this a little bit differently. One of the things that we talk about in class is if I look at this, I can see A has a value for x at 1 and B has a value of 5. If I add 1 and 5, I get 6. And if I take half of that, I'm at 3. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm averaging the x coordinates here. So if I add 1 plus 5, I get 6, and half of that is 3. And look, 1, 2, 3. 3 is the coordinate of the midpoint, right, for x. And same thing here if I'm going up and down. Anyways, these notes are these math notes are here. They're here for all the big topics. Anything that we're learning, anything that's new, you're going to find those available. Let's go back. And they're organized quite nicely by chapter inside of this math notes. Another thing that parents have and students both have told me, and actually I've had tutors that have said, can we just print these up? Is a list of the parent guides for each of the chapters. So for chapter 7, there's only actually 2 sections, and for chapter 8, which we're currently at, there's 2 sections on parent guide. So the first section here is exponential functions, and if I hit that, right now it's just opening up a PDF file that I could open up and print. But this is describing the big idea in this section, right? Exponential functions and what we're doing in this section. And it always contains several examples. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3 worked examples. And then it always has a collection of additional problems. And then right after that, there's answers for those. So if you're wondering, how in the world do I represent an exponential function in multiple ways? This is a great place to look. This is a great resource, and it really explains this well. It's not that it's any different than the information that's presented in our textbook. It's just collected in one spot that tutors and students have found to be useful. What else do we have? Oops, let me go back down to references. And yeah, another thing that happens, and I think it's in student support also, is is throughout the book we have these items called checkpoints. And once we reach a checkpoint, the assumption is we've been doing these kinds of problems long enough that you should be reaching mastery for them. So if I look at chapter 7, there was 1 checkpoint from there. And this is interpreting associations, right? So if I look at, there's association between VO2 max, and that's the volume of oxygen that happens in milliliters per kilogram per minute, and power in watts. So this is just one example here. But if I'm looking at this, I can see, this was actually a problem in the book, wasn't it? Yeah, this was actually a problem in the book. So I can see the answer here. And then they talk about everything that's necessary to understand and do this problem in terms of, if you're looking at data, what's the form of the data, what's the direction of the data, how strong is the relationship or the association between the 2 different data points, are there outliers, how you generate least square regression lines, what's residual, what's the correlation coefficient, what's R squared. Then there's a couple worked examples. If you have the TI calculator, it's a good time to get it out. And even though most of this stuff is here, right, you should go through and see, can you generate these graphs? And then there's some additional examples below, and below that there are answers for those as well. So that's, now, where did this start? This probably began probably in chapter 3 or 4. That's when we first started talking about association and how we interpret them. So if you wanted to go back and find out more about that, like where did this happen in the book and how can we get a better look at that, you can always go back to the glossary, for example. And I love the glossary, right? So I'm just going to look at the word association. So a keyboard shortcut for my computer is to hit, I think, Control F, and it pops open a search box. So now this glossary is quite large, but I can just look for the word association. And you can see there's 30 times that the word association occurs in this document. And fortunately, the very first one is the alphabetical association, right? So it's a relationship between 2 or more variables. An association between numerical variables can be displayed on a scatter plot and described by its form, direction. So form, is it a line? Is it a curve? Direction, is it increasing or decreasing? Strength, how close are the data points to the line? And outliers, are there points that are clearly not part of the data, they're outliers? And then why are they outliers? Could it be just incorrect data entry, or is there something interesting about that outlier? And then possible association between 2 categorical variables can be studied in a relative frequency table. And we've been looking at that not with a relative frequency table, but we've been looking at them as scatter plots. Um, anyways, um, the textbook is way more than the homework help. And to be honest, I see a lot of students that will, first of all, their only access to this textbook is on a tiny little phone screen, which is sad because it's difficult to see all of this stuff that's here and realize the richness of it. But what I see a lot of students doing is they'll just go to the CPM homework help. They'll go down to not calculus. Yeah, this is our series. So yeah, integrated one, and just jump to, if you're looking at these, you can look at, okay, this is a homework problem. Now, the problem itself, if I look at it, the problem is here, right? This is the actual question. But I will see a lot of students just look at just the question here and realize, and that there's not much here, right? And you can get these hints, but you know, what is the multiplier? I don't know. I think there's a lot more to the book than just this. So try to, I'm not saying never use the homework help, but try to start with other things first and try and build understanding. And please, consider the parent guide, the math notes, and resource pages. I don't even know what this is. Oh, these are handouts that happen in class. So these are just different things that we would print out, and I typically distribute in class. I'm available most days after school. School day ends at 2:30. If you'd like to come by and look at this more, just stop by the office, get a guest pass, and come down and visit me in my room. I'm happy to show you more with the book and sit down and figure out a plan for how, how we can help you learn. How can we help best you learn, or if you're a parent that wants to come, or even a tutor, right? I can't talk about specific students, but if you're a tutor and you're working with students and you'd like resources on how you can help students, please come see me. I might even be able to check out a student ebook for you so that you can have this available and be able to look at all these things as well. This is Mr. Roberts. Have a good day.